Good evening, everyone, and thank you for coming to the League of Women Voters-sponsored Candidates Forum tonight. It's a little bit of smaller crowd than we had a week ago. We had over 140 people here. We were way in the back over there, and it was amazing. But thank you for coming out. We are starting tonight with, the Minnesota congressional races, and then we will move to the county races. First of all, because of a great response, we have a table set back there with our friend Gene Askey running it, and the city of Moorhead now is, we were recruiting judges for the election. We now have a full slate, but if you would like to sign up to be an alternate, to be a judge for next time, please see Gene at the table back there, okay? I made it up as I go. Now, the League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan political organization that encourages informed and active participation in government, works to increase understanding of major political policy issues, and influence public policy through education and advocacy. I want to personally thank our MCAM fans here who come over here every time and record this, and they will rebroadcast on YouTube and on the local cable channels. And if you go to their website, you will find out the schedule for all of them. Thank you, Tony. And thanks to the library. We have one of our library people here. Thank you. They have been the most cooperative group in Moorhead for hosting our forums, and we really do appreciate. They do a great job. Everything is set up. I don't have to do anything. This is a forum. It's not a town hall, so you cannot shout out questions from the audience. We don't do it that way. Questions will be submitted on these little cards up here, and our moderator, which happens to be me tonight, will read them all. And I don't know if this is quite as important, but questions should be written in some way that all candidates can answer it. It might be better for the next session than this session because there aren't very many up here. Similar questions may be grouped together. Okay. Are you gentlemen ready? Okay. We have Mr. Peterson, Jason Peterson, who shortly after I sent out the letters inviting our candidates to come to this forum, called me and said he could not be attending tonight. That was shortly after the letters went out. And then this late morning, I think it was, I got an email from Mr. Idso. He is home ill and asked if his campaign manager could come over and read a statement that he has prepared. So Amanda Brandenberger, his campaign manager, will come up and do that. This is standard policy, by the way, of the League of Women Voters. If a candidate cannot be here, he or she may submit a letter. I will read it, or if they choose to have someone read it for them. Okay.
Good evening, everybody. We would like to state our sincerest apologies that Jordan could not be here tonight. We want to extend our apologies to the League of Women Voters, to our opponent, and to everyone who came tonight. Jordan felt that he did not want to share his illness with you, and really was incapacitated by the flu. I met with him last night, and I certainly don't want it either. All that being said, in Jordan's own words, I would like to thank the League of Women Voters for putting on this event. It's really great that there are independent groups out there that facilitate these forums and put in the effort to make sure that people have the opportunity to hear out all candidates and make a more informed choice, as well as engage with us. Of course, I'd also like to thank you all for showing up tonight and being willing to listen. My name is Jordan Itzo, and I'm running for House District 4A, which includes the city of Moorhead and Oakport Township, nearly 40,000 people. In our family, like yours and others across Minnesota, Past generations have taught us the meaning of public service and the importance of giving back to one's community. For some, that means volunteering at church or at schools, and for others, it means taking a leadership role within a local civic group. And for others, it means providing generous financial support for worthy charities. After extensive personal reflections and discussing with family, I have determined that serving our community through public service is a similarly worthy goal and a goal that I intend to once again pursue. The slogan of our campaign is Moorhead First. What I mean by that is Moorhead is our first priority. Before the state and even before the party, there is Moorhead. If you choose to make me your representative, my top priority in the legislature will be to make this slogan a reality. Moorhead, for far too long, has fallen victim to the partisan squalor and party policies in St. Paul. Such things that we take as given in Washington, but much of that same rancor has cremated St. Paul as well, with too many elected officials towing the party line rather than towing the line their district has set for them. I could get into the future of policy, the economic and health challenges we face as a community and as a state, but we first must restore our priorities and put this district above party and state level politics. The job description of representative is in the title. You represent. You represent your district, its needs, its wants, its values, and you vote accordingly. We must restore common sense and reorganize our priorities. That is my ultimate goal in seeking this position. Again, we both thank you for all coming and I look forward to your questions afterward. Thank you.
Thank you, Amanda. One more bit of information. Amanda has consented to be available outside of the campaign area or the forum area after the forum if you have any specific questions you would like to direct toward Jordan's campaign. Tonight, we will alternate questions between the two candidates. They will first have 2 minutes to do an opening statement. And then questions that you've submitted that I have up here will be read. They will have up to 2 minutes to respond, and then we'll do a 2-minute closing. So 2 is a small number. And we have a timer, Carol, sitting right in front, and she will keep them honest and let them know when they're close to running out of time. So, Ben, we'll start with you. Your opening statement, please.
Well, thank you, Les, and Thank you to the Moorhead Library for continuing to host these types of events here, and certainly want to thank the League of Women Voters for continuing to facilitate these conversations. You know, it's really good for the community, really good for us as candidates, and you all as voters to be able to sit down and to have these conversations and to talk about some of these issues and to share some ideas here. So I really appreciate folks coming out on a kind of a soggy evening like we have here tonight. My name is Ben Lean. I'm the state representative. I've served in this capacity for 6 years for 3 terms, and I represent Minnesota House District 4A, which is Moorhead and Oakport Township. I am sorry that my opponent, Mr. Idsell, is not able to make it, that he is ill. I hope he's feeling better, and I appreciate his campaign manager being able to share that opening statement. I've really worked tirelessly over the last 6 years for Moorhead, funding the Border City Enterprise and Development Zone for our small businesses every year the last 6 years, getting funding for infrastructure projects like the railroad underpass at the 2021st Street location, also getting some funding from the DNR for the flood mitigation and some of the home buyouts and things that we've been doing here in Moorhead. So that's really what we need to be doing, is continuing that work for the city to make Moorhead as strong as possible and to put Moorhead in as good a position as possible for future growth. And I think a lot of that has to do with not just the business community and infrastructure, but also education, making sure that whether we're talking about pre-K up through higher education, that people have opportunities to succeed. And I think the future of the economy is really reliant and really dependent on the future of Minnesota's education and being a leader in education for the nation. With that, I look forward to your questions here this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you very much, Les, and thank you to the League of Women Voters for hosting this forum and for everyone for coming out tonight. As Representative Lee mentioned, these are very important. It has been a true honor to serve the residents of District 4B. And one of the most enjoyable things I do is go out and door knock. And I'm meeting with people and talking about what they're saying and what's on their mind. And that's really, really important. That wouldn't be possible, however, if you didn't have a lot of support from your family. And I do. I'm fortunate to have that support. And I've been married to my wife, Colleen, for 37 years. We have 2 daughters, Lindsay and Ashley, who's here in the audience, both teachers, following after their dad. Very proud for that. And Lindsay is married to Grant, and they have 2 children, which makes it 2 grandchildren less for us, and that is Addison and Lincoln. Addison started kindergarten this year, and Lincoln is 7 months old. And Colleen is up in Grand Forks because tomorrow Grandma can come to Addison's school. So that's where she's going to be tomorrow. My commitment has always been putting rural Minnesota first. And what that means, very simply, is making sure that we are keeping our communities and schools safe and that we're supporting our law enforcement. It's investing into a good economic future, which is education and infrastructure and job skill development. It's making sure we reduce taxes for our senior citizens and our families and our farmers and our businesses. It's making sure we have accessible and affordable health care for everyone. And finally, but not least, it's making sure we take care of our veterans and our senior citizens. And that's been my commitment, a bipartisan, common sense commitment all the years I've been in the legislature, and that's my plan to continue to do so for the next term.
Thank you, Paul. And since we're alternating, you get to go first, and you did bring up the veterans in your statement, so I'm going to move to that question. The state of Minnesota offers a property tax relief. Is that what it'd be called, Dan? Relief for disabled Minnesota resident veterans under property taxes. If the veteran dies, the surviving spouse only gets the exemption for a short period of time. Is there any way we can get the legislature to address the issue that perhaps those surviving spouses of disabled veterans could get that relief for the rest of their lives?
I'm happy to talk about that because back when I was a property tax chair, we passed that original bill out of the committee. And what it says is that if you are a veteran, 100% permanently disabled, the first $300,000 of your home is tax exempt. And if you're 70% disabled, it's $150,000. It is well deserved and something we absolutely have to provide to the veterans. One part that wasn't so easy, and I don't know why, but I remember we had problems in the Senate getting that through, was to try to make that permanent for the surviving spouse. And it's, I forget exactly how many years it is right now, but does they?
8.
It's 8 years. Okay.
8 years.
Yeah, we've actually ratcheted that up over time, and now it's at 8 years. We're going to come back and try to extend that. That's only fair because you know, the spouse has probably relied a lot on the income from that veteran. Her spouse was a veteran who gave a lot for our country and having a disability that was caused from his or her service. And so we've got to make sure that they're not forced out of a home that they have lived for 30, 40, 50 years. And so that is high on the list to try to make sure we can make that permanent. But thank you, everyone who asked that question.
Thank you. Ben?
Yes, I would support that initiative. It seems to come up every year in the legislature, at least the last 6 years, either extending it or allowing it to be a lifetime exemption. And yes, I would support that for the very reasons Representative Marquardt mentioned, that those veterans have given a lot for this country. And I think that that's some of the least we can do to say thank you and to help out their surviving spouses. I've also worked the last couple of years on a bill that would exempt for 100% disabled veterans sales taxes and registration fees and things like that on vehicles. I know North Dakota has a similar provision, and it was actually a veteran that reached out to me and said, hey, you think we can do that over in Minnesota? We get some pretty good breaks on the property taxes, so how about on the vehicle taxes? And so that's something that I've been working on the last couple of years. Unfortunately, we have come up a little bit short on that, but I'm hoping that we can move forward and incorporate that into some real comprehensive long-term transportation funding for Minnesota.
Thank you, Ben. The next question is, and I'm going to just read it as written because I don't know what this is. What is your position on the money bail system? What are ways the legislature can improve the prison systems, local law enforcement systems? Ben, you're up.
Sure, thank you. The first thing that comes to my mind is improving mental health services and the way mental health is handled in Minnesota. I think Clay County is making some pretty good strides with their new jail and law enforcement center and really incorporating some good mental health programs in with that new facility. I think it's something like, on any given day, 40% of people who are in the jails, whether it's the county jails or the state penitentiary, do have some sort of mental health issues. So that's something we need to get a handle of. Also, it's really sad, but a lot of times people who have those conditions and issues, they don't necessarily get the help or the treatment or even the notice that this is something that they should be getting treatment with until they encounter the criminal justice system, until they are in jails like that. So that's something that we need to do, really do better with. And I think we are making good strides, but it's something we need to keep at.
Thank you. Paul, same question.
Well, I agree with Representative Lean, and Clay County is on the forefront with their new jail that they have, as they're dealing with the mental health issue. And that's, looking forward, because, anyone in law enforcement will tell you such a high percent of the criminals and people they deal with have mental health concerns. And so that's where a lot of these dollars have to be put into. And when you can combine a prison facility with also the mental health needs that these people need, that's going to be very beneficial. But I want to talk about law enforcement for a second, because one way in which you can help that system is to make sure that we have strong support for our law enforcement. I really get sick and tired of hearing our law enforcement being second-guessed by a lot of public officials and people out there. Because we know that if law enforcement if they have any doubt when they're out there on the street, they're not going to come back alive that night. And that really scares me. And I think law enforcement needs to know that as legislators and public officials and lawmakers, that we have their back. And that, quite frankly, is really concerned me lately in some of the rhetoric that we hear around the state, but also around the nation. So when we kind of look at this whole system, we've got to make sure we're backing our law enforcement and giving them the tools and resources to not only keep our community safe, but themselves safe also.
Thank you. Next question. I'm going to the more unusual questions first, by the way. Assuming we already know something about this topic. What can the Minnesota legislators do about nuisance robocalls? Yeah. Especially assuming Minnesota names and phone numbers.
Les, that's a great question. And I was
Thank you, whoever.
Yes, I was just talking to a person the other night about this. And one of the first years I was in the legislature, we passed the no-call list, that you could put your name on a no-call list and put your number on there. And these robocallers or people were not supposed to bother you unless you had done previous business with them. But I don't know if that's working or not anymore, because people that I've talked to are getting calls at all times of the day and night. So I'm not going to say I know exactly what we can do, because I do think with something like this, enforcement is really tough. I mean, someone gives you a call and you don't have a number, you don't have anything to trace it with, so how do you even hardly report it to police? Now, when we get some of these shams and things that are occurring, that's a different story, where they're keeping you on the line and they're trying to create fraudulent things. And, the best thing there is just call law enforcement right away, because there are laws on the book for that. But as I told the constituent the other day, this is going to be an item, because I've heard it an awful lot this summer and fall as I've been out door knocking. And hopefully it's not just people trying to take polls on the candidates. But it is something we really need to deal with, because it's well, not only is it pestering people, but then it gets into the fraudulent part where they're actually getting people money out of people, which is not a good thing.
Thank you. Ben?
Yeah, thank you for the question. That's certainly something that I think irks everybody. If it's not the trains, it's probably the robocalls here in Moorhead. So, I would absolutely support doing what we can there. I would question, maybe there are some interstate commerce issues, and it might be something that the federal government would have to address. But certainly if there are things we can do on the state level to address it, I would absolutely support that. I think, too, it's important for us to stay diligent and really to stay vigilant about these things. That if we're hearing of some of these things happening, that we're sharing it with our neighbors and with our friends and with their family, especially when it's the issue of vulnerable adults or senior citizens, that we just really know what's going on and really share that with our community. And I think, too, that for people who may have experienced this, and to share this, kind of let people know, okay, well, what'd you do? I know there are a lot of times where you just have to say your name, and then they can record that and then use that to get, credit cards or bank accounts or whatever. So I think it's just really some of it is incumbent on us just to be vigilant about it and diligent about it, and just to be really careful and to share what's happening with the community.
Thank you. On to the next question, which I remember being asked many times before. What is your view on the prospects of the FM diversion?
Well, right now we are under a public comment period for the supplemental EIS, the supplemental environmental impact statement, and I think it's moving in the right direction. From everything that I've been hearing, it sounds like it's moving in the right direction. I really give a lot of credit to Governor Dayton and Governor Burgum for sitting down and creating that joint North Dakota-Minnesota task force. I know there were a lot of local elected officials on that, and I thank them for the work they did on that. But it seems to me like it is moving in the right direction. I know there are still some concerns out there that the plan doesn't completely, comprehensively address easements and payments and things like that for landowners, and that's certainly something we need to address and we need to deal with. But the bottom line is that, in my opinion, a diversion is going to be the best thing to provide the long-term flood protection that Moorhead and Fargo need, for that matter. I'm thinking about also homeowner insurance rates. I know in my neighborhood and also in North Moorhead, people have been recently being taken out of the floodplain, so they don't need those flood insurance protections anymore. And that's something we need to keep striving for. So I think a diversion plan is the best way to provide that long-term flood protection for Fargo-Moorhead. And from everything I can tell, it is moving in the right direction. I believe the decision by the DNR to issue a permit for the new project that was put forward, I think, will come sometime in December later this year. So looking forward to that.
Thank you. Paul?
Well, I think, as most know, I've been publicly opposed in the past because of, especially as Plan A was being worked through, because I thought the process wasn't being followed and Minnesota rights and landowners upstream weren't being heard. As Representative Lean said, Plan A did not pass, but the Governor Dayton, Governor Burgum, to their credit, came in and really brought people together. And I do think gave Minnesota a much stronger voice in this process. And Plan B, while not perfect, is a much better plan. And we need long-term flood relief. I was the mayor in Dilworth in 1997 when Grand Forks went down and Breckenridge was flooded and Ada was flooded, and Fargo and Moorhead hung on because the temperature hit 5 below for 2 weeks afterwards and slowed up the overland flooding. So we need to do that. And so we will see. The DNR, as Representative Lean said, is working on the plan. If they do come back and approve of the plan, then I think we have to make sure that folks upstream and others impacted have fair and just compensation. But we'll see what happens. But a lot of the concerns with the process and that got a lot better when the governors got involved, and much to their credit, I think that really helped move the ball forward.
Thank you. And Paul, you get this one first. Local infrastructure projects have advanced in recent years. What projects do you see as priorities in the next session? And I believe this questioner is talking about local projects. Local questioner, were you looking at local? I got a nod, so.
Well, I think it should be simple to get that $70-80 million for the 11th Street underpass now. No, just joking. But we got a lot done the last couple sessions. The 21st Street underpass, $47 million over 2 years, and Representative Lean and Senator Eakin worked very, very hard on getting that. That wasn't easy coming back a second time this year to do that, but Representative Lean and Senator Eakin were on the forefront in getting that done. So we got that done. Much of the flood work now in this area is done, Halstead. We still have to do some road raises by Hendrum and some of these other communities, which is going to be important. The Heartland Trail is very important. Of course, the ongoing things on our colleges and university, very important. But we also have the Clay County waste facility out here that was close to getting done this year, and we need to. That's going to be a top priority also. But, other things are going to come up. But as you bring the bonding bill up, that is really important. And there always seems to be some opposition to that bill, and I never really figured out why, because it's all long-term things that we need: college buildings and flood mitigation and roadways and all these things that serve a lot of people throughout the state. And so I'm hoping whoever goes back this next year, we can get a robust bonding bill that will really deal, because we probably had almost $4 billion of requests this last year, and yet we were able to do about $1 billion. So the needs are out there, and these are needs that are serving people around the state in a very important fashion.
Thank you. Ben?
Thank you for the question. Really, the bonding bill, the capital investment bill in the legislature is when bipartisanship needs to work. You need some votes from the majority caucus. You need some votes from the minority caucus in order to pass that bill and to advance it to the governor. And, Senator Eakin and I, we did work hard for that $48.3 million to get the 21st Street project done for Moorhead here these last 2 years. And I credit that to both of us just having a spirit of bipartisanship, being able to reach across the aisle and work with Republicans to get that project done. As Representative Marquardt said, the Clay County Waste Transfer Station, I think that needs to be a top priority for this area for the next 2 years. It's shovel ready, it's ready to go, all the planning is all done. We just need the dollars from the state to be able to construct that. But then also, as Moorhead grows, and we saw that here these last couple of years with Oakport, or the parts of Oakport Township that were annexed into Moorhead, there was some flood mitigation work done up there, and so I think we will continue to have to do some of those buyouts. And as people leave their homes, who decline to take the buyouts, as those people leave their homes, we're still going to have to patch up those levees and things, so that work will be ongoing. And the downtown underpass. We were very fortunate and successful to get the 21st Street underpass done, and so now the city is really looking at the underpass projects in sort of a two-phase approach, where now with 11th Street, that's going to be the next phase, and the city is applying for some federal dollars, and so if we're successful to get those dollars, we're really going to have to prioritize the state match on that.
Thank you. And Ben, you go first with the next one. It's a two-part question. What are the expectations of the Minnesota budget for the next biennium? And you've referenced a couple of those, both of you have. Do you think money will be available to support higher education at a higher rate?
The last budget forecast, the February budget forecast, showed a $329 million surplus for the remainder of this biennium. And we did not have any supplemental budgeting done this year in 2018, so all that money is basically going to fall to the bottom line. Also, revenue collections, we get reports every month on revenue collections for the state, and they have been ahead of projections here this year. So I do anticipate come the November and then February forecast, when the session hits, that the legislature and the state will have some dollars to work with. I don't foresee us, knock on wood, but I don't foresee us being in a deficit situation. And so I think we really need to prioritize any spending here next year on building Minnesota's economy. I think job training and education have a lot to do with that. I think broadband development has a lot to do with that, especially out here in greater Minnesota. And I think healthcare has a lot to do with that. We've got to get a handle on healthcare. It seems that both parties have kind of had a shot at healthcare, and right now we do have some stabilization in the rates, but that's only because the legislature put $529 million into healthcare over the last 2 years, and that's just not sustainable. We've got to get creative, and we've got to be looking at some different things for healthcare. So my answer would be really to prioritize growing Minnesota's economy and really making sure we have those economic opportunities for greater Minnesota. And I also want to add to getting a handle on the agricultural property taxes. The ag economy represents about a third of Minnesota's overall economy, and so that's something that we really need to continue working on.
Thank you. Paul?
We're going to be sitting pretty good with a budget. Right now, we have almost $2 billion in reserve, which is the most we've ever had in the state. So if we went into a little bit of a recession, we'd be able to handle that. And then, as Representative Lean said, we're probably going to sit with $700-800 million. We're not going to be behind the eight ball. And what I think we need to do is take a balanced approach. We have to prioritize and invest those things that are going to build our future economy, and that's going to be education, higher education, and developing our job skills, workforce. And with that, making sure we have the proper health care for our seniors and those with disability. On the other side, I'm a strong believer in that we need tax cuts. And, senior citizens right now, 40% in Minnesota, 40% of our senior citizens rely on Social Security for 50% of their income, and 17% of our seniors in Minnesota rely on 90% of Social Security for 90% of their income. And yet Social Security has only increased by 1.2% average over the last 9 years. So back in 2017, we did cut taxes on Social Security benefits, and I think we need to do more with that. We need to do more on agricultural property tax relief. A couple years ago, we did the 40% credit. We need to do more on that. We need to increase local government aid and county program aid to our cities and our counties to lower property taxes. Property taxes hit us hardest of all here in rural Minnesota, and we need to keep those property taxes down. And so kind of a balanced approach. We need to invest, but we also have to look at ways in which we can reduce costs for our senior citizens and our farmers and our families and our businesses. That's the way you're going to keep rural Minnesota growing, and that's the way you're going to keep our economy strong and robust.
Thank you. Paul, you get this one first. Where do you stand on state legislation regarding guns?
Well, I've always gone by the premise, I'm going to start it with this, that a normal person does not go into a school and shoot children. And so I am a strong believer in you've got to deal with the mental health aspects. And too many times that when something happens disastrously in these schools, that people immediately kind of jump to these conclusions. I'm willing to look at things that really will make a difference with gun control, only if it's going to make a difference, because the Second Amendment is a very important right. And before we make any changes to that, we have to make sure it's actually going to work. One of the first things we have to do is make sure those who have mental health issues do not have a gun in their possession or do not get a gun, ever. That's number one. But I think sometimes some of the laws that we pass or that we're looking to pass are only going to hurt law-abiding citizens. And so I really want to look at addressing the mental health issues, making sure people that have these health issues do not receive guns.
Thank you. Ben?
Thank you for the question. Representative Marquardt is right. We do have to first and foremost be looking at making sure that people who could be a threat to themselves or society, that they're not easily that they can't easily access guns. I mean, that's just something. It's horrific that it takes mass shootings and these types of things for us to be talking about these issues, but that's kind of where we're at right now. And so many times it is those mental health issues, I think, that people do commit those crimes and everything. So that's something that we need to keep that we really need to address. I would also say school safety. That's something that we need to address, and one of the big reasons I did vote for the supplemental budget bill this year was because we did have $20 million in there for school safety. Being able to improve entrances at schools, being able to hire more resource officers in the schools. That's a big deal. I think that'll go a long way. And overall talking about firearms and the Second Amendment, we do have to have a balanced approach, because the issue in greater Minnesota is not the same issue as it is in the metro area. And so we need to acknowledge that. We need to accept that. I do think there are things we can do, like the high-capacity magazines. I think there are some things we can do there. I think there are some things around the gun show loophole we can do where, if you have a Gander Mountain booth and somebody selling their private collection right next to each other at a gun show, that you have to get a background check at one but not the other. Some of those types of things. I think we can address some of those loopholes. But yes, Representative Marquardt's right. The bottom line is we do have to get a handle on the mental health aspect of it. We've got to get a handle on the school safety aspect of it. And we have to take a balanced approach that's going to work for the entire state around firearms.
Thank you. And Ben, the next question. What do you feel should be the top 3 priorities for the 2019-2021 session? The next session. I messed that up.
Thank you. Well, healthcare, that needs to be something that the legislature addresses. And I alluded to it a little bit before. We are seeing now the rates came out for the individual group plans, and those are starting to come down. The growth of those is slowing, but we are still having problems with the small group plans. And when I hear from independent business owners or people who are self-employed, those are the folks who are saying, man, I just can't keep up with these health insurance increases. And so that's something we need to get a handle on. I think taking a look at a public option would be good, or a Minnesota Care buy-in, where if folks want, if they don't have any other options, that would be something out there that they could buy into. Along with that, I think maybe we could take a look at doing away with the mandate on small employers. Those employers that have 100 or fewer people in the states can have some flexibility around that. So, I think those are a couple things we can put forward. Certainly keeping our economy growing. I alluded to broadband and job training, and education as a big part of that. We need to make sure that people have options for pre-K, no matter what part of the state they live in, whether we're talking about the scholarships for the parent-aware rated daycare providers, or whether we're talking about voluntary pre-K through the school districts. Those options need to be out there for people. We need to get a handle on tuition. I would like to see us move more toward that 2/3, 1/3 model, where the state's picking up 2/3 of the tab for higher education and students are picking up 1/3 through tuition. But along with that, we have to have frank conversations with the public or with the institutions of higher ed on what's causing the increase in higher education, or the cost in higher education. And then I would also say infrastructure, whether it's talking about infrastructure in our communities or infrastructure for higher education. That's a way to get people employed. That's jobs out there, and it's going to make our community stronger.
Thank you. Paul?
Well, I alluded to some of this earlier on investing in education and job workforce and healthcare, and also with tax cuts. But I want to talk about one proposal that I think would spur the economy more than anything else we could do right now. If you talk to employers out there, they are looking for nurses, welders, plumbers, electricians, contractors, these skilled level jobs. In fact, Minnesota right now is 50,000 short on these skilled type jobs. And the projections are that with baby boomers like myself retiring in the next 5 years, that's going to grow to about 200,000. The proposal would be, and I've worked with Representative Gene Pawlowski with this, would be to link your technical colleges back with your high schools like they were before 1983, so that every student before they graduate from high school would be able to obtain a job skill set or a certificate or associate degree that would meet the jobs that are existing right now. Quite frankly, in the last generation, we have kind of focused everyone to go to these four-year colleges, and it's left us with this huge problem. They did a survey of manufacturers not so long ago. 60% of them are worried about finding skilled people to do their work. And what we've wound up with is a huge jobs gap and huge student debt. This would also, the jobs are right there. This would keep students in the community. It would save students costs. It would save parents costs. It would provide employers with the employees that they need, and it would build your economy locally. You go to Detroit Lakes, at one time a business was looking for 40 welders. There's a business in Detroit Lakes, who would know, that hires 40 graphic artists. I mean, if you're a graphic artist, you've got a job right there. But I think this would be a way that would really spur our economy and meet the needs that our manufacturers and our employers are looking for right now.
Thank you. I just got one more question. So I'm gonna read it the way it is. I haven't pre-read it. So, school safety could be enhanced by hiring more school counselors to deal with some of the mental health issues. Is not only from the outside but the inside. How can we deal with this as a state? And Paul, you get to start.
Well, we've got to commit to doing that. That was, in a lot of proposals last year, were dollars to make our schools safer. And one of the bills got vetoed. But it's a two-prong approach. Number one, it is making your school facilities safer. And I talked to a lot of superintendents and a lot of administrators from schools. And they would improve even locks on their doors, their entrances, do all sorts of things to harden the buildings. But the other side of it, which this question leads to, is you also have to address the mental health issues. And we are seeing in our schools these mental health concerns starting in preschool. I was talking to these administrators, and they see 20, 30 in one school that they're going to be addressing with mental health issues. We have to put our money where our mouths are. If we really want to make safe schools, we have to invest in our counselors and our mental health folks to get into our schools. It's left our teachers with a really tough task, too. I mean, they're also part of this, dealing with mental health issues every day, too. So we need to provide the resources. It's that important. But we can't just do it by hardening schools. We can't just do it with mental health counselors and so forth. We have to put all of that together, because as a legislature and as a state, our duty is to make sure that no parent has to worry about sending their kids to school and not being safe in school. That is number one. You're not going to learn if you're not safe. You're not going to be able to teach if you're not safe. You're not going to get educational outcomes if you're not safe. And I always have said that safety is the number one thing a government provides to its citizens, because if you're not safe, nothing else matters.
Thank you, Paul. Ben?
Thank you for the question. It is a very important issue, and as Representative Marquardt says, it does have to be a comprehensive package, a comprehensive approach to this issue. We do need more resources for infrastructure, like I was mentioning, improving the entrances at schools, getting more community or resource officers in the schools. I think that's a big part of it, but also addressing the mental health aspect of it. I talk with teachers in the Moorhead district, and they're telling me the problems that their students are bringing into the classroom nowadays are night and day different. They're just more intense, they're just more demanding than they were even 5-10 years ago. And so something's going on there where the students are bringing this into the school, into the classroom. And I think another part of that is that Minnesota needs to do better with school counselors. We need to do better with guidance counselors and academic counselors. We're about last in the nation in terms of student to counselor ratio, and we have been for quite some time. And so that's something we need to do. We need to do a better job of. I think it would help not just in students being able to adapt to their school surroundings and help with some of those challenges they're bringing into the classroom. But I think it would also help with workforce development if we have, academic counselors and guidance counselors who are equipped and capable to help our students out. Students are going to be thinking about some of these economic development things and some of these career options that they have a lot sooner, and I think that's something that we need to address. But talking about school safety and mental health in our schools, it does need to be a comprehensive package where we have infrastructure, we have the human resources really to keep our students safe, to keep kids safe.
Thank you very much. And that finishes all the submitted questions. So we will move now into closing statements, and Ben, you get to go first.
Well, thank you very much. As I said, I always appreciate these conversations and these events and these opportunities to hear from voters, what people are thinking about, what people want to see the legislature address. It's really beneficial and really valuable for myself at least. So I really appreciate you all coming out, and I really appreciate the League of Women Voters for continuing to have these events. I think the bottom line is we just really need to make sure that the resources that we have for the state are going into the economy, are going into economic development. I think job training and education has a lot to do with that. I think the ag economy has a lot to do with that, broadband and healthcare. We need to make our greater Minnesota communities places where people want to live, where young people want to stay, and where they have good job opportunities. So again, thank you all for the evening here.
Thank you. And Paul?
Well, thank you to League of Women Voters. Les, thank you for moderating. Thank you, everyone, for coming out. And, it's all about trying to maintain and improve a quality of life out here in rural Minnesota. And a lot of times we're up against the metro and so forth, but we have a great way of life here. And we need to make sure we can preserve that. And the way you do that is doing all those things that help people day in and day out. And it's making sure we've got good health care. 20% of the folks in District 4B are senior citizens. As they get older, we have to make sure that the area that they grew up and they've lived in their whole life, that this remains that top-notch place and they can live here under their terms as long as they can. One of the things that can always spur our economy is going to be education. We have to make sure that we are investing in education so we can hire the best and brightest teachers, and we have good facilities to make sure that we have students that are learning and providing ultimately the economy we want. We have to make sure we support our law enforcement, to make sure we have these safe communities. We have to make sure we take care and support our veterans who have given so much, and there are many veterans and very good organizations in this area. And, I've always said to people, if you want a person that's going to vote 100% one way or the other, don't vote for me. They've done nonpartisan studies, a Pioneer Press, at our voting records down in the legislature. And they have found the last couple times that I've ranked in the top 3 in being the most bipartisan. You've got to work with the other side to get compromise. And so it's been an honor to serve District 4B, and I would ask people for their support, residents of District 4B, to give me the honor to serve another couple years. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much, candidates. Can we get a round of applause for our candidates?